Hey everyone, Raghu back with Mindrolling and an old friend, Ralph De La Rosa. Ralph is my Buddhist therapist. One of them, I have a few of them, and they're all extraordinarily helpful. Welcome to the show, Ralph.
Thank you so much. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Um, well, we're all going through quite a bit these days, ain't we?
we
And
sure.
knowing because we've been talking off and on for several weeks, actually, trying to arrange all this, you have been going through some extra suffering, I would say, right? You are not immune at all, and probably having to put into practice much of what you teach people.
You could definitely say that. There's been some personal crises, multiple within all of this non-coronavirus related. It's a time both in the world and in our society and personally that I am deeply grateful for having some years of practice
Mm,
uh, integrated into my life because it's come into play in such an unprecedented way. That
I
is,
bet. I bet. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and you don't need the extra, really. I mean, I know, people like my contemporaries from being in India, where you see this background back in the day.
yeah,
And yeah, we're all, without any, there's like, you have some direct cause and conditions going on aside from the virus. But you don't need those extra causes and conditions. And we're like, you wake up in the morning and you're not sure why you feel this unease,
right,
right?
right.
And it's a pervasive, very pervasive thing. And I quote, I have been quoting lately, the Chinese have a really great characterization of these times. And for them, they characterize times of great chaos as
Mhm.
dangerous opportunity, right?
Yeah,
Dangerous opportunity. And is it not that?
no risk, no reward. That is
Yeah.
that is true. And just to demystify things, maybe for the listeners,
Okay. Yeah, that'd be good.
speaking too abstractly, I had a situation erupt in my apartment with an aggressive neighbor, and I found myself sharing a two-story duplex with somebody who was making active threats and acting in an intimidating manner towards me. This happened right at the onset of
That's
Corona.
right.
I came home from a snowboarding trip, and this gentleman had moved in, and it was just right when Corona got really serious, and it was like the two, just intertwined. But I'll just say, as you know, the path is one of alchemy, right? How do we turn these difficult situations, to put it in a nice way, into gold for ourselves? And so I'm actually joining you from Lake Tahoe, California, where my need to leave my apartment suddenly, which was in Beacon, New York, turned into, you know what, let's go to my home state of California, be a little closer to my family, be with the trees, be with the mountains, and and ride this thing out here, maybe for the next year or so. And so really, the journey with this gentleman, who I hugged goodbye, by the way,
Really? Oh,
was a
tell me
transformation
that. Oh,
in
wow.
our
Oh,
relationship. But yeah, I figured, let's make a really empowered choice rather than a reactive choice in terms of where I ended up and all of that. But,
mm, right. That's great to hear, actually. Wonderful to hear. Um,
oh,
so, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I do offer that, not so much to brag about my good fortune in the midst of all of this, to be able to have that sort of mobility, is certainly very, very privileged. Um, but more because it's an analog, right, for so much of what we are going through. Personally speaking, society is a little bit different, politically it's a little bit different, But personally, with people feeling trapped, with people feeling like their options have never been more narrow, with all the anxiety and the worry and the fear that's out there and what have you, that's it's the bullet points are the same for all of us. That yeah, dangerous opportunity, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, and it isn't really brought on particularly by this pandemic, but it's something that I find in my own milieu generational, that you get into spiritual practice, and that over the years it will absolutely take care of all of the issues that come up, including the emotional issues, the psychological issues, and all of it. And I guess in more recently, in recent years, and also partially because of my closeness to Ram Dass,
Right.
him being very much coming out of that world, the world of therapy and psychology, I have come to find that it is extraordinarily important to do the kind of work that seems quite easy to bypass through different practices for many, many people, and I've seen it in myself. And then it got to the point where some striking things were going on in my life, and I just knew that the practicalities of delving into my own psychology, whereas I've been going below somehow, if you want to call it below or above or somewhere, but there was a way in which there was a non-acceptance of the reality of being able to work with emotions rather than go around them. Or, when I was first in India with Neem Karoli Baba, I got a built-in story going about I am a sadhu, yogi, I don't need the world. And because of the circumstances, they felt very much like that. And then throughout my life, that story, which I started to believe less and less as time went on, it formed a basis for a kind of escapist thought pattern, right?
Okay.
I can always do that. Screw this. I can just go off and be in these mountains right here behind me, and no problem. And so that's why I'm, Ralph and I had a conversation, must be a year ago or so, a year and a half ago, I'm not sure. And I have had other conversations with other different friends who are practitioners that are in particular Buddhism. That seems to be the fit, so to speak. I haven't seen any Hindu people that are working through this kind of stuff, which is interesting. It's a whole other podcast. And using Buddhist psychology and Western psychology as practices to help us really identify and dig deep into what it is that, where it is that we are caught. And, let's talk about emotions. And, there's something that you wrote or said at one point, which I made note of. And it's, it's probably maybe it's not that long ago, that in the midst of anxiety and panic and the nervousness and uncertainty, that the reminder that you had that we are not bound to how we feel in any given moment. You do not have to shut down or shove aside your emotions in order to quell them. And you quote, say, actually, that's an act. That's an act of self-violence, and that rang really true. Talk about that a little bit. It's a dramatic statement, yet I think a very true statement.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds dramatic at face value, but it is a subtle form of aggression that we enact anytime that we're not in full acceptance of who and what we are in, the ever-changing tides of things. It actually takes a tremendous amount of work to shut down our anger or to medicate our anxiety or to pretend, some terrible habit isn't there. It's a tremendous amount of work, and what we're doing in those moments is we're walling off parts of ourselves, right? As if they are no good, as if they have no function in our lives, as if they serve no purpose, And the truth is that I don't mean to sound glib, but I'm speaking from experience as a trauma survivor, as an addiction survivor, as somebody who was once diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Um, that the pain and the fear and the troubles in our lives actually can, when we know how to work with them, like you were talking about, when we've ingrained some really good spiritual or good psychological habits around how we relate to those emotions, it can serve as the biggest inspiration, actually. I launched an online course last night on working with trauma and working with difficult emotions. And I was awestruck because the registration was double. It was the fourth or fifth time I've offered this course, and the registration was double.
Well, no shit.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's like, well, that speaks to the need being greater than,
Yeah, yeah.
but also here we are. Twice the number of people are driven to ask deeper questions, to look at their lives in a new way, to take a risk and hang out in a 6-week course with some Yahoo that they, know from Instagram. And we don't, this, and we don't ask the real questions when we're cozy. We think we've got it. And I did that same dance with Bhakti Yoga myself too for a long time. Like, let me just put on the white and wear the beads and the tilak on the forehead, and and I'll go by my Sanskrit name, and as long as I can just chant to outrun this other version of me, then I'm good. But the problem is that other version of me kept catching up to me. So sooner or later we've got to turn around and face what's in us. And that's not bad news. That's the beginning of a transformative journey.
Yeah, and the idea of accepting the fact that these things that do come up, anger and depression and worry and all the uncertainty, everything that's going on, painful relationships is a biggie too. And to look at these phenomenon not as enemies, but as wonderful. The universe is speaking to us in a way that's going to allow us to transform. Without that spoken to-ness, how are we even going to realize any of this? Which is, goes back to, if we talk about the purpose of coming into a body and a life, and what that purpose is.
Yeah.
If we take the big picture, wow, yeah, this is, and this is something that we brought back from India, and Ram Dass popularized the notion, suffering brings me closer to God. So, and it's a weird thing, of course. The kind of suffering that he had after this massive stroke, he could say that shit. Where, you know what I mean? He really, really lived it right up to the last moments of his passing. So, that, and you do talk a lot about that. Message, as you put it, messenger sounding an alarm, calling our attention to what longs to be healed at our depths. I think that's so super important. And, I talk a lot about the way that we are glued and stuck to our thoughts and belief systems. And, I notice this is something that is very, very central to what you how you work with people, basically, and that's unstuck, right? How do we get unstuck? And yeah, talk about that. I mean, not just the philosophical thing, but the reality of what are we doing, what to do to get unstuck. I mean, you know, this real life. I mean, you just went through this very, very difficult thing where you're getting this tremendous animosity thrown at you, and it's probably triggered all sorts of different emotional things. So, how did you, work with that?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm a bullying survivor too. I mean, I was
Right.
bullied basically to the point of acute PTSD and agoraphobia, and I dropped out of high school because I was afraid to go outside anymore when I was 16. And so this situation in my home that erupted was just bringing up the residue of all of that, and of all of that stuff that I thought I had healed too. But it was bringing it up in a new way, because the impulse to react, to fight back, to give in, and to engage was so pervasive, the whole time, every day for weeks. I wanted to go off on this guy, and I
Mm,
managed to not once. And
mm,
this is speaking as a recovering rageaholic.
mm, mm,
That to me, that was a tremendous victory. But
mm. I
fortunately,
like, by the way, just sorry to interrupt, but I love that what you just said is so in line with my own experience. I thought I was done with that. I thought I was done with that. I mean, that happened to me just not that long ago around something I thought I did not have any relationship with it anymore. Maybe I'll just share it with you just for fun. But I think I believe you know who Krishna Das is. Yeah. So anyhow, we would go to India together at different times over many, many years, and we would go, and there was a woman saint who was with Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba for many, many years, and we used to see her all the time, and it was just wonderful to be in that kind of a space with a being like that. It was like, okay, we can go do that instead of plugging into go to IMS and do Vipassana meditation for 2 weeks and come out the other end fine. But in this case, it was because we're lazy. We're lazy bhaktis, right? We don't have what you all Buddhists have. You have that drive to hang in there, and we're going to talk about meditation later. But yeah, anyhow, so he and I, we have a very close relationship and had for many years. And we walked in to sit with her, and he was sitting on one side and I was sitting on the other. And she just turned to him and gave complete attention to him. Me babkas, as they say in Yiddish, nothing. Okay, and in my head, I went, I felt this welling up of jealousy, which to me, that's not been a big part of the destructive emotions that I've had in my life. But there it was, and I had it, and I had it, and as soon as I had that thought, she just turned to me and went, "Raghu," and I went, "Oh, fuck! How could this happen again? How?
yeah,
You mean that's still going on? That kind of a thing." In this case, of course, it was very advantageous to have somebody around who absolutely knew what was going on and point it out, get that pointer right in the moment. But yeah, that's a biggie, because I find that when that happens, the fall down, it seems like a steeper, slippery slope, right?
yeah. Yeah, indeed. I mean, we all have that longing for love that comes out around teachers and different
Mm.
uh, bigwigs in our lives, right? And that's some of what I hear in that story, that perhaps that was in operation. I know it's in operation for me a lot.
Yeah,
But
yeah, exactly. So unstuck. How are
so,
we
so
going to get unstuck from this
let's
shit?
get technical for a moment here, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, like I said, I think that was in my newsletter, that we are not bound by the difficult emotions that arise. That's not the end of the story, because it's true that it's always how we're feeling, and then how we're feeling about how we're feeling, right? Like kind of classic Buddhist thing to say is, what is your relationship to your experience, right? Like it, don't like it, hate it, bored of it, sick of it, don't care, frustrated that it's coming up yet again, right? And I've been working for a few years now with this process called parts work that is absolutely, it's almost magical in a way. It's very, very surprising how some of the rudimentary techniques operate. And this is an evidence-based form of psychotherapy that has a lot of resonance with Buddhism and teachings on Buddha nature and spiritual practice, very meditative.
It's called parts work, right?
Yeah, it comes from something called internal family systems therapy.
Uh-huh.
And the idea is let's say, all right, so here's me, right? And for those who are just listening, I'm holding up one hand, right? And then this other hand is like an angry part of me, right? That something happens to me over here, and this hand just, collides with this hand and takes over. Okay, now we're angry, right? And in neuroscience, they would call that cognitive fusion, right? Whatever is going on in my mind, I think I'm that, basically, right? And so this is what they would call in IFS, or internal family systems, being blended, right? Or more colloquially, being stuck. I'm stuck in my anger. It's this visitor who barged in, and even if I ask nicely, it ain't gonna go nowhere, right? But what we can do is we can breathe with that emotion. We can begin listening to that emotion. What is it saying? What are the thoughts that are springing up? We can start shifting from an inner monologue at that point to an inner dialogue. Okay, what do I say back to that part of me that has this long litany of complaints? And we can learn how to unblend, right? To put a little bit of space between us and how we're feeling in any given moment, through awareness, through paying attention, through maybe even asking inside. And here's the really cool part. You can just ask inside, hey, angry part of me, will you give me permission to get a little space from you to separate out so that we're not so bound up and we can work on this problem we're having together? And entering that sort of dialogue, talking to your emotional parts as if they're other people, it's just deceptively simple because some things start to happen. And I see this within myself doing this process. I see it in my students. I see it in therapy sessions every day, that it might take a little while, might take a few minutes, but suddenly, there's a little bit of space. And then the next question is generally, well, how do you feel towards that angry part of you or that sad part of you? And, well, I hate it. I want it to go away. Okay, well, can you ask that part of you that's hating it now to relax and step aside? And what typically happens is again, it'll take a few moments, but there'll be a shift in a person. And then we'll just kind of peel back the layers until we get to the most important ingredient in the process, which is curiosity and compassion. Okay? If we can get to curiosity and compassion about how we're feeling or the negative beliefs that's front and center in our worldview in any given moment, that starts to open up doorways, like big doorways where we can then explore where did this anger come from? What's the first time I can remember feeling this way? Does the voice that this anger have resemble somebody, maybe somebody in my family, where I took on this pattern? And we can begin, that's really a setup. That's a particular alignment for healing, right? Starting to hear the story within around where our sadness, our loneliness, our anxiety comes from. We can start asking, what those parts of us need as well in order to relax, in order to move on. And that might all sound convoluted, but it's actually more simple than it sounds. And sometimes it's just a matter of stepping into a facilitated process with somebody. This is all my books are about. And there's lots of meditations on Insight Timer and my SoundCloud page, and lots of stuff that people are curious about stepping into that process. It's the basic point is it's never just the sadness or the negative emotion. It's the sadness plus how we feel about it. And if we can bring compassion to the situation, then things start to move along. Our emotions can return from that like icy, frozen, claustrophobic state and move more towards the river that they're meant to be, right? We might not instantly feel better, but at least that emotional energy is no longer like caught, and we're moving. And I find that this process, which I sometimes say taught me more about Buddhism than Buddhism did. Taught me more about resilience and compassion and our deeper nature than a lot of meditation practices did. Though comparisons are really useless, really insightful. It puts us in a position where we start to learn things. We start to get light bulb moments and ahas and revelations and connecting dots and that we wouldn't get otherwise. To really just listen to what your anger has to say, your sadness has to say, what the worry about the world has to say, can be quite revealing. Yeah. That's a whole lot of technique I just threw at you.
Yeah. I want to add to that. This is my ad, not yours, although, because there was another thing that you did talk about, which I'm quite aware of as well, where it's been scientifically shown, you say, to increase the emotions in the realm of generosity and love, shown to increase immune system functioning most positively to the point of enhancing the efficacy of the influenza vaccine in one study. That's kind of interesting given what's going on now, but so true. And you just talked about compassion, and we have to talk about starting compassion with oneself. And it's my problem sometimes with non-dual, or let's talk about Buddhist philosophy, because that's where we're at right now in terms of the packaging, is that there's a way in which a sidestep can happen, especially with talking about compassion, because it's a concept. Okay, you're going to turn in on yourself some kind of good feeling and okayness, right? Now, we were talking about bypass a little bit ago, and talking about, and you had done some bhakti yoga practice and chanting, and you can chant from here to forever, and that kind of thing. I posit, because it's the one thing that I can be sure of, that if I engage in, because chanting is one of the major things that we brought back, emblemized by what Krishna does out there in Jai Uttal. And there's a way in which what it does for me is it bypasses the self-talk thing, the stuckness to my story or thoughts or judgments, all of that. It just completely goes, and I say that has, at the same time as I say that, I also say what I said earlier, one needs to approach all of those emotions in a way that reveals them, and in a way that it speaks to us, to enable us to realize.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But going in through the heart, directly around, especially around compassion and love, obviously, and developing that muscle, shall we say, where through the practice of it, you really start to experience, okay, I'm human. It's what Jack Kornfield always argued. We're human. It's okay, And we start there in terms of really coming from what Ram Dass called before the end of his life, it was his major teaching, loving awareness. To center yourself in that perspective,
Yeah.
that just absolutely cuts out all of the self-talk, the self-judgmental stuff, all of it. So you actually can experience the rendering of compassion and love in just through the molecular structure of your being. And yeah, so I just had to throw that in, around compassion, because and of course, the stuff. I mean, metta, loving kindness, and what Sharon Salzberg is so well known for, and has been my teacher in that realm, is what we're talking about. It's just getting at it in a little bit of different way. And for me, of course, chanting, because music has been a big part of my life, so it's easy for me. For other people, the just down-to-earth metta practice is perfectly in line and in the same realm of getting to a point where there isn't a judgment, there isn't that second voice going, well, this is good for me, or I should do this, and so on. So anyhow, just throwing that in there around compassion, especially.
I mean, we're talking about just two different inner technologies that lead to a opening of the heart, and it gives us a direct experience of that deeper human nature that lives within us all, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'll just say that, I mean, I work with a lot of trauma survivors, and those are kind of my people. And I know when somebody holds a lot of trauma in their body, they might chant japa and really resonate with that practice, but like that undercutting might be a little more difficult for them. They might be, bombarded by intrusive thoughts or intrusive sadness or what have you in the middle of their, practice. And so basically, to tie this together is then in that context, if one is in touch with that deeper nature in some way, if one has that loving awareness, can that upset part of you share in that? And in that way, your difficulty becomes your offering.
Yeah.
Becomes, part of an inner puja, if you will.
Yes, well said, well said. And here's something else, everybody. I mean, it's a wonderful little quote from Ralph. Believe it or not, reactive emotions are our goodness cloaked in what appears to be neurosis. Okay? This is an important statement, Ralph, and I want you to open it up a little bit, because we are primed to believe that our reactive emotions are a destructive force that we must get rid of immediately.
Oh yeah. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, please. I love the story.
Yesterday morning, I went out for my morning run, and I didn't get even 3 minutes into it before a gentleman pulls up in the truck, and he holds out his phone, and on his phone is a picture of a bear, and he goes, "This bear is right there." And there's, residential neighborhood, there's this beautiful, very cute golden bear rummaging through trash, and just 50 feet away from me. I'd never been so close to, this magnificent and terrifying creature, right? And of course, I was shocked and then scared, and then, had the thought, like, is this thing, it could easily just charge for me right now, and there was actually quite a few people around. And so I got out of there. I stayed and I watched the bear. I took a little video from my phone, on my phone for just a moment, and then I was like, well, let's get out of here, And it blew me away, though, that I knew that there were bears in the mountains around here, but just hanging
not
out
right there.
Yeah. Right. But if we think about the bear for a moment, right, at face value, menacing, dangerous, life-threatening, these things are true. That's face value. But if we think about the bear for a moment, if we look at things through the bear's eyes, through the bear's vantage point, the bear, all organisms are motivated by basically the same things, which neurologically speaking, we know that our primary three drives are safety, gratification, and belonging. To love and be loved, and to have our basic needs met, and for life to feel like good in some way, or at least that there's growth in some way. And without those, that's when things start to get a little afflictive. But that bear was just looking for food. He wasn't trying to be a menace. He wasn't terrorizing the neighborhood.
Right.
He was just trying to find his next meal. He was just trying to survive. And if that bear were to have charged me, it wouldn't have been because he's an aggressive creature who has this terrible nature about him, or her, as the case may be. It would be because that bear was feeling encroached upon and threatened and unsafe in some way, and has a biological imperative to fulfill that basic need for safety that is irresistible in all of us. And so it really, just this experience connected some dots in terms of how we think about the bears in our lives, the metaphoric bears that go on in our minds and our hearts, right? If at face value, menacing, terrible, difficult, uncomfortable, claustrophobic, creating all kinds of patterns in our lives that repeat themselves all over and over again. But the truth, the truth at the biological level, we could go to the spiritual level, but we could even just look at the body. The body is driven by intelligent impulses. And all of those difficult emotions, much like the bear, are driven by those same fundamental needs for safety, gratification, and belonging. That's at the root, at the level of the basic spark, the basic impulse. What gets tricky about our emotions is that they're filtered through all of our conditioning, our familial, societal, all the experiences we had that told us what it meant to be a person, what it meant to be in a relationship, what it meant to exist in a society. And so things at the level of expression of those emotions can get twisted up. But we are an ecosystem unto ourselves, and everything in an ecosystem serves some kind of purpose in service of the whole. Our anger might be a big, big problem in our lives, but anger is always a response to feeling hurt or betrayed in some way. And so anger, serves this function of letting us know our boundaries have been crossed, letting us know maybe that there's a deeper wound that is needing to be addressed underneath. And with regards to the deeper wounds as well, I cannot tell you how much my life has been enriched by inner child work, by really just going there to the dark and deep places, often in silent retreat, but often, just in therapy with my therapist. There is something really powerful about learning how to love those parts of you that feel unlovable, that feel like they're garbage, that feel like we're never going to get it together, or that everybody I love leaves, this immense sense of abandonment that so many of us walk around with. Learning how to be with yourself in those places, again, to get to that place of self-compassion I love how you said, staying with our emotions until they reveal themselves. Because they're not what they, like David Lynch said in Twin Peaks, right? The owls are not what they seem. Or as the Buddha said, things are not as they seem, nor are they otherwise. Right? So like that sadness is sadness, right? But it's not as it seems at the exact same time. There's a deeper layer. And all of these emotions that we have, they're intense because that gets our attention. I mean, would they get our attention any other way if they weren't so awful at times, right? Or painful, or you get it. Right? So in this way, everything that goes on within us actually has a purpose in our lives. And we unlock that purpose when we know how to relate to it. And when we start to see that, it becomes laid bare that Buddha nature, that true self with a capital S, that inherent love that we know ourselves to be, maybe even just conceptually, at the deepest layer, it becomes apparent that actually our sadness, our anger, whatever difficulty exists in our lives, is still an expression of that. It's just things have gotten very convoluted and complex.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it all falls in line with how we got started with this conversation. That to to switch the perspective that
Mm.
we're seeing everything
Mhm.
and going, wow, this is great. This is good fodder. This Ram Dass calls grist for the mill. He wrote a whole book about it. This is wonderful, and as you say, and as you have said, the way we relate to ourselves is probably the most important aspect of our work in this life to become free of the kalesas, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
all of those massive overlays of disgruntled judgment to feeling like, Jesus, we're just awful people. This whole conceptual morass that we get into, which is why I am loving talking about. Just turn that around, turn it around. You have a great quote from Pema Chodron, who we all love so much. War and peace begin in the human heart. Whether that heart opens or closes has global implications. That statement is even more powerful given what we're going through on all levels, from the pandemic to the social inequity to the political situation and the vast polarization that is taking place in this country. So just switching that. It's a little flip. It can be. I think it's just a little flip of going, okay, right, okay, I'm going to now create spaciousness by virtue of I am willing to allow these emotions to exist, and I'm going to have a cup of tea with them, right? And I'm going to
Yeah.
say, stick around, let's talk for a minute, which goes, fully into your parts therapy, right? Let's talk about this, right? And so I think this is invaluable, especially for all of us that are going through so much these days. I want to turn here before it's too late to talk, because I also love, Ralph, how you talk about meditation in particular, because that's something quite important in terms of, yes, get with somebody that you can share, who has some wisdom that you can share these deeper parts of yourself, all the way back into childhood trauma. Of course, do all of that. Work on self-compassion, self-love. But there has to be a way, of course, to actualize some of this stuff, and certainly meditation. And I put chant in there. It's no more or less than meditation. You're repeating something. You got to let go. Let go, let go, let go. So, but I think this is interesting. You talk about the Tibetan word for mindfulness based meditation is Gom, Gom, and translates, you say, into familiarization or habituation, and I'm quite aware of that as well. And it's again an arena for becoming intimate with the heart mind, right? And then you put a little bit of a different twist. Why don't you explain that? Can you talk about from familiarization to habituation? Give us that twist, because I think it's really great.
Yeah, it's similar to the therapeutic stance and process that I described earlier. A little different in less conceptual forms of meditation, definitely. But I mean, if we look at the words familiarization and habituation, right? Familiarization that stems from the word family, right? And habituation, somebody's habitat is their home, right? And so this notion of meditation as a coming home to ourselves, coming home to the body, coming home to the heart, coming home to our deeper nature, or coming home to just the way things are maybe really shitty in the moment. But one of the things, japa, meditation, whatever it is, having a daily spiritual practice, it begins to be a home base that no matter what's going on in our lives, we can return to over and over again. There's always this constant in our lives of having this space for ourselves where we can come home. And I think I borrowed a line in that newsletter from my first teacher, Vinny Ferraro, who says that, meditation ought to be the kind of endeavor where, how we can come in from a long day, out in the world and just flop down on the couch and kick off our shoes and, finally I can just be who I am and anything goes, pants optional. And meditation really can become that for us, and with regards to what we experience in meditation, we can start to think of those distracting thoughts or deep neurosis or whatever as members of our inner family, and can we claim those parts of us? And can we show them a little love? And like you said, can we have tea with our afflictions so that we move in the direction of, I lived for a long time with what felt like a very dysfunctional family inside of me. Everybody was yelling at each other all the time. Had to do some pretty intense things to get away from that. But can we move in the direction of a harmonious family where these parts of us are actually getting along and talking to each other and maybe even helping each other out? I'll share with you one example of that I've been working with more recently that's to great benefit, which is, I don't know about you, but the moment I sit down, like about 3 minutes into meditation, I get the best ideas, the best book ideas, or the best teaching ideas. It's like meditation teaching is actually my primary obstacle in meditation. And so I'll literally just ask that part of me that's coming in with all these ideas, you know what? That's a great idea. Would you mind holding on to that for me for about 20 minutes? And, every time I feel a little shift, and that part of me that's, hankering to get me to understand this phenomenal idea, which usually actually doesn't turn out to be so great after the meditation. But that part of me will kind of hang on to that for me. It's like giving a little kid a job when they're in the way as one is cooking a meal. You know what? Could you take the trash out for us or do the dishes? Just asking, the energy within you that's throwing up all this distraction. Could you just hang on to that for me for 20 minutes? We're doing something here. And that's what I mean by it becoming a harmonious family inside. Open lines of communication with all aspects of our being, all the non-selves that are running around inside of us.
There's another great phrase from you that speaks to what you're talking about and is so, just the sound of it, people, oh God, no. How about becoming the inner, rather primary love giver to the inner children that are residing in this incarnation that you took. It's such a difficult concept of being loving like that to what we consider are demons. And we've been taught to believe they are demons, I see this in myself off and on. You know, I've seen this over these many decades. The only good thing about getting older, folks, is you stop giving a shit about what you think, and they are not. You become unstuck. You will become unstuck.
Right.
We do become unstuck, especially if you get in at least a something on a daily basis of some kind of practice. And I think, hey, here's a great idea. Sit down in front of your anywhere, altar, in a corner, sit in your bed, I don't care where, and just think, okay, now I'm going to be a primary love giver to everything that comes up.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, hopefully, we're going to do a little bit of concentration exercise, either using breath or whatever, to at least get a little bit one pointed, and then allow the sensation to come and then embrace them. Can we do that? I mean, even that sounds like, that's the love giver. That sounds like foreign. Like, and you even go all the way to go, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. It's like it's a nasty guy in there, a nasty gal in there, and I don't want to do. Just think of the way these kinds of thoughts come up about who we think we are, and that we are that. You know, and I think primary love giver. Sit down and become the primary love giver. I love that. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I've got to give props here to Richard Schwartz, actually, who wrote the beautiful book, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, which is just the best book I've ever read on.
Really, I have not familiar at all. Richard Schwartz.
Richard.
By the way, everybody, we've been talking a few different things here that are opportunities to catch up either with Ralph or Richard Schwartz. What's the book?
You Are the One You've Been Waiting For.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long ago is that?
Uh, I have no idea, honestly. But this is part of his way of working with what comes up in intimate relationships, right? Because I've been in so many relationships where I was looking for somebody to fix it for me, or to fill in the gaps left from my childhood, or to find the partner that's finally going to make it make sense, or finally meet me where I am in some profound way. And it never works out. It never works out because we're actually using that person at that point, or to get away from my loneliness. This is a big one, right? Loneliness and wanting to be in a relationship are two different things.
Yeah.
And if you're in a relationship because you don't want to be alone, and you don't want to be lonely, or you're dating somebody because you're sick of being lonely, you're actually using that person.
Yeah.
And so, how can you become the one in charge of loving those wounded parts, right? Because all of our wounds come from what? Non-love, basically, right? If we were to really boil it down, times when our need for love was betrayed. And so, uh, uh, Dan Siegel talks about this a lot too, very prominent.
Yeah, no, Dan. Yeah, wonderful, man.
Yeah. How the research shows is that when we attune to ourselves, when we have that inner self-empathy, and we, kind of hear ourselves out, hold space for ourselves, like we so desire for other people to really do. The research shows that the body responds in almost the exact same way as if we're getting that energy from somebody else. If we can be our own best friend, our own parent, our own primary source of understanding and love and space and compassion. It's I say this to folks all the time. If you missed out on love in childhood, which all of us did in some way, because no parents are perfect, and our needs are so great as children, but that ship hasn't sailed. The door isn't closed. You can still become that for yourself. And that's such a liberating and promising truth, actually.
Yeah. And the only way to have a real relationship with anybody, not just an intimate relation, is to have that start. As we've been talking about earlier, have a real relationship with oneself where compassion and love
Mhm.
are self-evident, and then we can begin to tackle some of the issues that put many of us around the bend. Huh? And I think we
Which,
should say, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, which starts with being willing to sit down with yourself.
Right.
How many of us want change in our lives, but we ditch the meditation cushion because we don't want to just hang out with ourselves? Well, how
Yeah.
can you change? How can any change happen if you're not willing to be with you?
Yeah.
So it really does, for me, it really begins and ends there
Right.
with meditation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, this has been fabulous, Ralph. And I was trying to say a little earlier that when you people, everybody out there, of course, we will have in the show notes links to Ralph's work, and we're going to put a link into. I want to get this. Is Richard Schwartz still alive, or do you know that?
Yeah,
Yeah. He is.
yeah, he is. He's the progenitor of internal family systems, and he's got a new book coming out on Sounds True too. He's really
Oh, okay.
starting to write about this parts work thing from a spiritual perspective.
Wow.
And I will, if I may, I could drop a Mindrolling exclusive on you because this will be the first time I'm announcing it that I have a new book coming out in August. That's called "Don't Tell Me to Relax: Emotional Resilience for the Age of Rage, Feels, and Freakouts."
Hmm.
And so, a
Okay.
lot of
Well.
what I'm talking about
uh,
is
Well,
present in that work. So,
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, you. Okay. Well, please get me a copy of that book, and then later, in the summer, near when it's going to come out, we'll let everybody know about it and talk about it. Okay, Ralph? And I'm
absolutely.
going to go and find Richard. Sounds true, our friends. So I'm sure that'll work out. That's great. So all of this will be linked up, and you'll let us know when the pre-sales are going to start, because we're not that far away. Jesus, time is flying. We're getting to the middle of May.
It's there. It's on Amazon. It's on. You can pre-order from Shambhala Publications. I think it's shambhala.com.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay,
it's
well,
all
we're
there.
going to
I'd
get
love to have a closer to the publisher.
yeah, yeah. Well, everybody who's involved making uh, mind rolling happen and the Be Here Now network happen, they're going to find all of this and put links up in the show notes so everybody has all of this available. And and I'm so glad to hear that the furthest out thing in this whole thing was that you had a hug with this guy that was threatening you.
Well, the relationship really softened. It was really, yeah. It
Really?
was really kind of magical. Yeah, he's a person just like me who struggles with some things, and I came to see that, and I
Mm.
think he came to see my humanity too. And
Mm.
it was actually kind of a beautiful ending to what had been a very difficult trajectory.
Wow,
Um,
that's
so,
fantastic. And by the way, that's a great meditation. That I don't know if you know who Mirabai Bush is, but she's
oh
part of
yeah.
our Love Serve Remember Foundation, and
Mhm.
she does this beautiful meditation called Just Like Me, where you sit like you and I could sit and just do eye contact
Mhm.
and just uh, relate the ways in which it's all you are just like me, I am just like you, and as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, all we all want the same thing. We want to be happy, we want to have love, and we want to be kind ultimately.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think the Dalai Lama, he
Indeed.
said his mother was completely loving and compassionate. He said that's why I am like I am. He said before. He said,
As if the Dalai Lama's not a trauma survivor too. I mean,
yeah, right. So if we're talking reality, right?
he's living evidence that transformation is possible through
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. The greatest human being on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, wonderful to see you. I'm glad you're safe and sound back here in California, Ralph. And we'll talk a little later in the summer again. And meanwhile, have a great day,
Yeah, you have a good
everybody.
one too.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah,
Such a
thank you,
pleasure.
thank you. All right, this is Be Here Now Network, Mind Rolling. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and catch all of our friends and teachers and podcasters that reside. See you next week.